With the 8th Spider-Man movie in a little under 2 decades being released this week, we decided to head back and take a look at the entire body of work of Spider-Man on the big screen and see where they fall when ranking them against one another. Come join us as we list the worst to the best of the 8 Spider-Man movies. Starting the list with number 8 is Spider-Man 3. On paper, before production, there was a lot to be excited about with Spider-Man 3. The symbiote suit was always a fan favorite. It was to feature Venom, who was probably the most popular Spider-Man villain, and it touted one of the biggest movie budgets in Hollywood history at the time. The box office directly reflected that, as it grossed more than Spider-Man Homecoming, but all of that optimism was short-lived when dyed black hair, jazz scene later. The villains failed to stand out despite the hype, and none of the villains were given enough motivation or character progression to care about or hate. Tobey Maguire's performance was one of the worst in superhero movie history, and proven actors James Franco and Kirsten Dunst flip-flopped from way too serious to utterly ridiculous. This movie failed from the opening credits and continued that downward spiral right until the end. At least the movie looked incredible. Coming in at number 7, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. While nothing will ever be as bad as jazz, finger guns, and dyed black hair Spider-Man, this movie certainly tried. What this movie suffered from was 2 stars who were actually a couple at the time. They had amazing off-camera chemistry, but unbelievable on-screen chemistry. It was bad, like high school flirting level bad. That, and a complete lack of anything resembling a compelling or challenging villain. Cookie-cutter villains with no real motivation, followed by some truly bad performances from A-list celebrities, was a recipe that even Emma Stone's big beautiful eyes couldn't fix. Although her portrayal of Gwen Stacy was one of the lone bright stars in the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. Her death at the end of the film was one of the most iconic moments in Spider-Man history. It was absolutely wasted on a middling film that struggled to live up to the hype. At number 6, Spider-Man 2. At its best, Spider-Man 2 was a movie freed from the burden of an origin story, giving the film a chance to focus on Peter Parker's life, split between being a superhero, a freelance photographer, and a college kid, which was charmingly relatable in the sense of what it's like to be young and have too many obligations and desires, but not enough time. At its worst, Spider-Man 2 set the precedent that destroyed almost 2 decades of Spider-Man movies by having multiple villains, with Dr. Octopus and Harry Osborn both wanting Spider-Man dead by the end and giving neither villain enough character development. Thanks for that, Sam Raimi. At number 5, Spider-Man. So while the movie has not aged well, especially when matching it up against the MCU, Spider-Man in its time was pure eye candy and a very quality movie. Superhero movies were still not anywhere close to being perfected, but seeing Spidey on the silver screen swinging through New York had never seemed so real as it did when this movie first came out. With a clean slate for an origin story, the how he came to be had not been overdone, and we had nothing to compare it to. And they did a good job of keeping enough from the comics to keep longtime fans happy. The iconic upside-down kiss, the "with great power comes great responsibility" line, and the first clip of a live-action Spider-Man swinging through New York City in over 2 decades, this movie had us. Looking back, it had many issues, but when we first watched it, we loved it. At number 4, The Amazing Spider-Man. While Garfield's performance in the sequel is the stuff of nightmares, people often forget that he gave the character a fresh new take with this movie. From the dreadfully serious to downright laughable performances from Tobey Maguire in the previous trilogy, Garfield brought a fun-loving and new energy to the character that fans were desperate for. The Curt Connors lizard story echoed that of the Doc Ock storyline in Spider-Man 2, which was frustrating, but it did the job of putting everyone in peril, sparking Spider-Man to swing into action. At number 3, Spider-Man Homecoming. In case you couldn't tell, we definitely feel like the character, Peter Parker, has been given some grave injustice when it comes to the actors who have played the role. Listen, we all love Andrew Garfield, but Tom Holland has found a way to keep the endearing charm of Spider-Man while still making him feel like the Peter Parker character we all know and love. A little bit of a geek, but a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man who understands the weight of his responsibility. Even without an origin story, this movie seems to give us everything we wanted, and we can't wait to see where Holland takes this character. Having the Vulture as the villain was a refreshing change of pace, and was for the first time in a long time a refreshing new take on the Spider-Man story. At number 2, Spider-Man Far From Home. Without spoiling anything, Far From Home perfectly sets up the Phase 4 for the MCU and upped its game not only in quality of the story, but also the performances. Both Jake Gyllenhaal and Tom Holland give it their all, and the on-screen performances show how much young Holland has grown into the Peter Parker role better than any of his predecessors. Topping our list at number 1, Into the Spider-Verse. When Sony originally announced that they would be creating an animated Spider-Man movie, nobody paid attention. That was until the comic book fans realized that the 2018 animated movie would essentially be a comic book brought to life. The film feels like an invitation into a world where storytelling, character development, and cool AF colors matter. Introducing Miles Morales as the costumed web-slinger, Into the Spider-Verse not only gave us an entire new multiverse to think about, but also gave us a fresh new take on a character that, let's be honest, has been losing a lot of its luster from being overdone. The story and character arcs were second to none, and that's why it's our number 1 choice. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to catch more BUZZNET content.